So, imagine this scenario for a second. You work in a modern office, right?
Okay, yeah, I can picture that.
You have state-of-the-art video technology. You have instant messaging. I mean, you even have machine translation that works in real time.
Right, we have all the tools.
Exactly. Yet, when you bring top talent together from different countries, projects still stall out. Deadlines are completely missed.
Oh, absolutely. Misunderstandings happen every single day.
Yeah. So, why does incredible technology fail to prevent friction on global teams?
Well, it is a massive problem. I mean, you can have the fastest internet in the world, but if the human communication is broken, the technology just does not matter. The team will struggle.
Welcome to the English Effect. Today, we are taking a deep dive into the realities of managing multicultural teams.
It is such an important topic for anyone working today.
It really is. Our mission in this deep dive is to help you improve your workplace communication. We will explore exactly how highly skilled global teams operate.
And because we want to help you grow your professional business English vocabulary, we are going to use real practical examples.
Yes, we are. The language we use today will be clear and professional. We will avoid overly complex business jargon.
We want you to follow along easily, hear how these key words are used in real business situations, and then you use them in your own career.
So let's start with the big picture. We need to look at the modern workplace reality. Today, almost every major company is multinational.
Yes, multinational, meaning they operate across several different nations.
Exactly. They employ many different nationalities. But what is really interesting in our sources is that becoming a multinational company is not always a choice.
No, it is not. Often it is a pure necessity.
Right. Why is that?
Well, the global population is changing rapidly. For example, older workers are retiring in huge numbers right now.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And at the same time, birth rates are lower in many regions. So this means the local native-born workforce is shrinking.
So companies literally cannot find enough people locally.
Exactly. To survive, companies must rely heavily on offshore employees and skilled immigrants to fill critical gaps in their workforce.
You see this constantly in fields like information technology and healthcare, too.
Oh, healthcare is a huge one.
Yeah, the World Health Organization predicts a global shortage of 10 million health workers by the year 2030.
Wow. 10 million.
Yes, 10 million. You simply cannot find 10 million workers in one single country. You have to look across the globe. You have to build a multinational team.
You really do. But bringing all these different nationalities together introduces a very expensive problem into the workflow.
Okay, let's unpack this. What is the problem?
It introduces ambiguity.
Ambiguity. That is a great word for our listeners to note.
Yes. When communication has ambiguity, it is inexact. It is open to more than one interpretation. It is, well, simply not clear.
And that blurriness costs real money, right?
A lot of money. According to research from the Swiss firm Slater, large multinational companies lose between 7 and 10 million euros every single year.
Wait, 7 to 10 million euros? Just from communication barriers?
Every single year, yes.
Okay.
That money vanishes very quickly. Because, ambiguity leads to delayed projects.
Right.
It leads to misunderstood contracts. It leads to failed negotiations.
Can you give us a practical example of how that happens?
Sure. Imagine an engineering team in Germany sends project requirements to a manufacturing team in Mexico.
Okay.
And those requirements have ambiguity. They're not clear. The manufacturing team might build the wrong product.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Then the company has to scrap all those materials and just start over.
I see. It is entirely different from a local office. In a local office, ambiguity is like a small typo in a document.
Right. It is easy to fix.
Exactly. You notice it, you walk over to the coffee machine, you talk to your coworker, and you fix the misunderstanding in 2 minutes.
But on a global team, it is not that simple.
But no, it isn't. On a global team, ambiguity is like sending a blurry map to a driver. Someone is going to get completely lost.
I love that analogy. And it will cost the company a massive amount of money to get that driver back on the right road.
So we have to look at what creates that blurry map. Why is there so much ambiguity on our daily video calls?
Most of the time, it comes down to nuance.
Nuance. Let's make sure that is perfectly clear for our ESL learners.
Good idea. Nuance is a very subtle difference in meaning. It is a slight shade of expression or sound.
Right. And different cultures handle nuance in completely different ways, don't they?
They absolutely do. Our sources highlight a major difference between high-context cultures and low-context cultures.
This is fascinating. How does that breakdown work?
Well, this is a perfect example of how nuance causes problems. Professionals from high-context cultures like India, Japan, or China tend to communicate indirectly.
Okay, so they don't always say exactly what they mean in literal words.
Right. They rely heavily on nonverbal signals. They use gestures, slight pauses, and facial expressions to convey meaning.
Oh, I see.
For instance, saying no directly is often avoided in these cultures because it can be considered rude or aggressive.
So in a real business meeting, a software developer in India might nod their head or say yes.
Yes, exactly.
But the nuance is that yes might simply mean, I hear what you are saying. It does not necessarily mean, I agree with your plan and I will finish the work by Friday.
Exactly. Now, compare that to low-context cultures like the United States, Germany, or Scandinavia.
Right. Those cultures are very different.
Very. In these cultures, communication is explicit. It is direct.
Yeah.
Words are taken completely literally.
So if you ask a German manager a question, they will give you a very direct, literal answer.
Yes, they will tell you exactly what they think.
You can easily see how a German manager and an Indian developer might completely misinterpret each other's commitment.
Oh, it happens all the time. The German manager hears yes and literally expects the project on Friday.
Right, and the Indian developer meant, yes, I understand the goal, but they know Friday is actually impossible.
Exactly. Neither person is trying to do a bad job. They are just missing the cultural nuance.
And this creates that 7 to 10 million euro loss we talked about.
It really does. But, beyond cultural context, the everyday vocabulary we use is also a huge problem.
Oh, you are talking about idioms.
Yes, business language is full of idioms.
An idiom is a phrase where the meaning cannot be understood from the literal words, right?
Right. For example, a U.S. professional might finish a great presentation and say, "We really hit it out of the park."
Yeah, that is a very common American business phrase.
But literally, they are talking about hitting a baseball out of a stadium.
Right, which makes no sense in a boardroom, but the idiom means they had a great success.
Exactly. Or a Russian speaker might express that a deadline is impossible by saying, "That will happen when the crayfish whistles on the mountain."
A crayfish whistling on a mountain, that is amazing.
It is. These linguistic shortcuts are natural for native speakers, but they completely confuse translation software.
I can imagine.
And more importantly, they alienate the non-native speakers on your team who are trying to translate the words literally in their heads.
Yeah, they spend the next 5 minutes wondering why a crayfish is on a mountain instead of focusing on the meeting.
Exactly. It creates a barrier.
Let me push back on this a little bit, though.
Yeah.
I understand that idioms create ambiguity, but aren't idioms a good way to show personality at work?
That is a fair question.
We want to build relationships, right? Do we really have to sound like corporate robots to communicate effectively on a global team?
You definitely do not need to sound like a robot. Showing personality is very important for building trust.
Okay, good.
However, in a multinational team, you have to prioritize clear, inclusive language.
So clarity comes first.
Yes. When you use a sports idiom like "hit it out of the park," you accidentally exclude anyone who does not follow American baseball. You create that blurry map again.
Ah, I see. So choosing clear, simple words is not about losing your personality. It is about prioritizing the success of the team over a colorful phrase.
Exactly. You want everyone to actually understand the goal. You can show personality through your tone, your helpfulness, and your actual ideas.
Right. You do not need confusing idioms to be interesting.
No, you don't. But the words we choose are really only half the problem.
Only half. What is the other half?
We also have to look at how our brains process the sounds we hear. This introduces a very subtle, highly damaging problem: accent bias.
Accent bias. Let's talk about that. A recent study in our sources found that 80% of international professionals link their English proficiency directly to their earning potential.
Yes, they feel immense pressure to adapt their speech.
But communication takes two people. The burden cannot rest solely on the non-native speaker, can it?
It absolutely cannot. Accent bias happens when a listener forms a prejudice or a stereotype based on the way someone pronounces words.
So it is about the listener's reaction, not the speaker's ability.
Exactly. Even when a person speaks English fluently, with perfect grammar, a listener's brain might struggle to process a heavily accented voice.
Research actually shows that listeners remember less accurately what a speaker says when they have an unfamiliar accent.
It's true. But the worst part is the credibility gap.
The credibility gap, what does that mean?
It means accent bias can cause a listener to unfairly doubt a speaker's intelligence or credibility.
Oh, that is terrible.
It happens in major business meetings every day. A brilliant software engineer from Brazil might pitch a perfect solution to a U.S. board of directors.
Okay.
But because of accent bias, the board might dismiss the idea. They unconsciously assume the idea is flawed simply because the pronunciation sounds unfamiliar.
So this leads to terrible hiring and promotion decisions. Highly qualified candidates are just ignored.
Exactly.
It is like listening to a brilliant song on the radio, but judging the music as bad just because your radio antenna has a little static.
That is a perfect way to describe it.
The music itself is a masterpiece. You just
Right.
have to actively tune your radio through the static to hear the genius of the idea.
Right. You cannot blame the song for the static on the radio. The listener has to do the work.
So what are companies doing about this?
Forward-thinking companies are realizing this is a listener problem. They are implementing inclusive listening training.
Inclusive listening training. That sounds very practical.
It is. This training helps native speakers actively tune their ears to unfamiliar speech patterns.
So instead of telling the non-native speaker, you need to change your accent, the company tells the native speakers, you need to become better listeners.
Yes. Understanding becomes a shared responsibility across the whole team.
That is a massive shift in workplace culture.
It really is.
So we have identified all these hidden barriers now. We have ambiguity, nuance, idioms, and accent bias.
A lot of hurdles to overcome.
Definitely. The next step is looking at how modern managers actually fix these problems. How do leaders turn a disconnected global team into a high-performing unit?
They need a specific skill called cultural intelligence, which is often referred to as CQ.
Cultural intelligence, what exactly is that?
Cultural intelligence is the active capability to relate and work effectively across different cultures.
So it is not just reading a guidebook about business etiquette in Japan before you get on an airplane.
No, not at all. Simple cultural awareness is just knowing a difference exists. Cultural intelligence is an active behavioral skill.
Okay, so it is about what you actually do.
Right. Our sources break CQ down into 4 specific steps.
Let's go through them. What is the first step?
First is the metacognitive step. This means actively planning your cultural interactions before they happen.
Okay, for example, let's say a manager is preparing for a performance review with an employee from a high-context culture.
Perfect example.
In the planning step, the manager thinks, I know this employee might not tell me directly if they are unhappy. I need to plan specific, open-ended questions to help them share their true feelings.
Exactly. That is metacognitive. The second step is cognitive.
Cognitive, what does that involve?
This is possessing actual knowledge about the cultural norms. The manager knows the specific communication styles of their team.
So they have done their research.
Right. The third step is motivational. This is having a genuine, positive drive to engage with different cultures.
So you view the differences as a strength, not an annoying problem to solve.
Exactly. And the final step is behavioral.
This must be where the action happens.
It is. This is where the manager actually adjusts their actions in real time. They slow down their speech. They avoid idioms.
They watch carefully for nonverbal nuance.
Yes. They seamlessly adapt their behavior to suit the needs of the multicultural team.
That sounds like a highly skilled manager.
It is. A culturally intelligent manager uses all 4 of these steps to fight a very dangerous workplace problem. Unconscious bias.
Unconscious bias. Let's make sure we define that clearly.
Unconscious biases are social stereotypes that individuals form completely outside their own conscious awareness.
We all have them, don't we?
We do. Our brains naturally categorize information to save time.
But in business, if left unchecked, unconscious bias leads a manager to overlook great contributions.
Absolutely. It leads to those derailed timelines and unfair promotions we talked about earlier.
So what happens when a manager uses their cultural intelligence to actively identify and remove these biases?
The workplace environment completely changes. They create an environment where long-term business success is actually possible. They build psychological safety.
Psychological safety, that is a crucial concept for any team.
It really is the foundation of good teamwork.
For our listeners, psychological safety is the belief that an employee will not be punished, humiliated, or fired for speaking up.
Right. They feel safe sharing ideas, asking questions, and admitting mistakes.
Why is that so important on a multinational team?
In a multinational team, establishing psychological safety is the only way to ensure that critical information flows freely up to leadership.
I see.
Think back to our Indian developer and German manager. If the developer discovers a major flaw in the project code, but there is no psychological safety, they might stay quiet.
They stay quiet because they're afraid of being blamed or because their high context culture discourages delivering bad news to a boss.
Exactly. And the manager will never know the project is failing until the deadline is completely missed.
But if they feel psychologically safe, they will raise their hand immediately and say, "We have a problem."
Exactly. Building that safety requires leaders to practice equity.
Equity, that is a very important business word. And we need to be very clear about the difference between equity and equality because they are not the same thing.
No, they're very different concepts.
Equality means treating everyone exactly the same. You give everyone the exact same resources.
Right. But equity acknowledges that not everyone starts from the same position.
So equity is about recognizing those different starting points and providing tailored, specific support.
Yes. Providing equity ensures that everyone has a truly fair chance to succeed in the workplace.
You know, a good way to picture this difference is with an analogy. Imagine you want your whole team to run a race.
Okay, a foot race.
Equality is giving every single person on your team a size 9 running shoe. It sounds fair because everyone got the exact same equipment.
But it only helps the few people who actually wear a size 9.
Exactly. Everyone else is in pain and they cannot run fast. Equity is giving everyone a shoe that actually fits their specific foot.
I love that. That tailored support is how you win the race.
How does that look in a real corporate environment?
Well, a manager provides equity by systematically training the team against unconscious bias. They set up cross-cultural mentorship programs.
Okay, that makes sense.
If a brilliant employee struggles with English presentations, equity is providing them with a speaking coach, rather than just passing them over for a promotion.
Managers also ensure equitable project opportunities, right?
Yes, they make sure high-visibility leadership roles are accessible to everyone, regardless of their cultural or linguistic background.
They give everyone the right shoes.
Exactly. They
Yeah.
give everyone the right shoes. And when a company successfully builds psychological safety and practices equity, the final result is high retention.
Retention. Let's explain that one.
Retention is the ability of an organization to keep its employees. It actively reduces staff turnover.
That is so important right now. In today's highly competitive labor market, recruiting top-tier global talent is incredibly expensive.
It is a massive cost.
Right.
Replacing a highly skilled worker can often cost twice their annual salary in lost productivity and recruitment fees.
Twice their salary.
Wow. Yes. So inclusive communication directly improves employee retention. When people feel understood, valued, and safe, they stay.
You keep your absolute best people engaged and loyal to the company.
Exactly. And this all comes back to the bottom line.
Right. Earlier, we discussed how ambiguity costs multinational companies millions of euros every year.
But by focusing on retention and equity, companies actually drive massive financial success.
Do we have numbers on that?
We do. Research indicates that firms that successfully manage high cultural diversity are up to 36% more profitable than their less diverse competitors.
36% more profitable. That is huge.
It is. Diversity is not just a soft topic for human resources. When you remove the communication barriers, you harness the full power of a global team.
You get faster problem solving, better product ideas, and higher profitability.
Exactly.
Well, this has been an incredibly useful conversation. Let's summarize the practical business concepts we explored today.
Good idea.
We started by looking at how the modern workplace is becoming naturally multinational due to shifting populations.
Right. And we saw how ambiguity in our speech creates a blurry map that costs companies millions of euros.
We discussed how nuance and idioms create hidden barriers in our daily video calls.
Yes, the whistling crayfish. We also looked at how listeners need to fight accent bias by actively tuning through the static to hear brilliant ideas.
Finally, we learned that managers must develop cultural intelligence to actively remove unconscious bias.
Yes, and by doing this, they create a culture of psychological safety.
They provide equity, which ultimately leads to better retention of top talent.
Mastering these concepts is about much more than just memorizing vocabulary.
It really is. It is about actively preparing yourself to communicate and lead at the highest levels of international business.
Absolutely.
Before we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a final thought to ponder.
Yes, something for you to think about this week.
We spent a lot of time today talking about how to understand other cultures and listen past unfamiliar accents, but turn that focus around for a moment.
Think about your own everyday communication style.
Right. Think about the emails you write and the phrases you use that you believe are perfectly clear. How might your clear style be completely misinterpreted by someone working on the other side of the world?
It is a great exercise. It forces you to look at your own assumptions before you join your next global video call.
We would love to hear from you. Please comment below with your favorite new business English phrase or concept from today's deep dive.
Tell us how you plan to use it in your next real-life workplace conversation.
To keep practicing your professional English, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The English Effect. Keep learning, keep speaking clearly, and we will catch you in the next deep dive.